we suspected all along. The wizard has been telling us fibs. But who exactly is a wizard? And where did this seeming madness all begin? So they go into some of it, and they mention Maurice Strong. He's one big player. He says the whole climate change business, and it is a business started with Mr. Strong, but it started with the Club of Rome too, who were given the task, this big think tank, given the task of finding a way that they could literally rule the people from their own excuses, basically, to do so. So they came up with the idea of climate change and how humanity was destroying the planet. That's what they claimed. So man was the enemy. So you'd need naturally experts to rule you see, because you couldn't rule yourselves. It said that would fit the bill, or the words of those in the Club of Rome. Anyway, it says Maurice Strong, a self-confessed socialist. Now you understand what he means by this. This is a multi-millionaire socialist, because he was created and brought up the ladder to be a multi-millionaire socialist by the Royal Institute for International Affairs, Council on Foreign Relations. It says was the man who put the United Nations into environmental business, being the shadowy figure behind the UN Secretaries General from Youthant to Kofi Annan. His reign of influence in world affairs lasted from 1962 to 2005. Strong has been variously called the international man of mystery, the new guy in your future, and a very dangerous ideologue. Made his fortune in the oil and energy business, running companies such as Petro-Canada Power Corporation. You're surprised how the Desmarais family, that is Power Corporation they call it, they churn out leaders. And they've churned out God knows how many prime ministers for Canada, for instance, and for corporations as well, CEOs. But anyway, it says Canada Power Corporation, Caltex Africa, Hydro Canada, the Colorado Lands and Cattle Company, Ajax Petroleum, Canadian Industrial Oil and Gas, to name just a few. But he was really a frontman for the Rockefellers. They created him totally from the beginning. They picked him up as a kid. And meaning what he is, he's a frontman. It says, so his private interests always seemed to be in conflict with his personal persona and his work on the world stage. Strong's extensive range of contracts within the power brokers of the world was exceptional. One admirer christened him the Michelangelo of networking. He described himself as a socialist in ideology and a capitalist in methodology. But see, the idea, those who enrich themselves at the CFR and Royal Institute for International Affairs at the top always fill their pockets. They believe that they're the world's natural rulers. And when they're picked up, they're told that too, to give them a little bit more incentive to keep climbing the ladder in these private clubs. And socialism is the way of controlling the population through laws with panels of experts, which is Sovietism, the meaning of rule by councils, folks, for those who don't know that. In 1972, he organized the Youthant First Earth Summit, the Stockholm Conference on the Human Environment, and it led to the formation of the UN Environment Programme with Maurice Strong as it said. Later, as the UNEP boss, he organized the first international expert group meetings on climate change. And it led to exotic UN-sponsored organizations such as the Earth Council and Earth Charter. And that was also drafted up by the Rockefellers, and Strong fronted for it. The World Resources Institute, the World Wildlife Fund, which is, again, the head at that time was Prince Philip, and later the Commission for World Governance, and the United Nations University for Peace. Remember what the old communist adage was too, this real socialism idea, the test bed for all. And believe me, that the heads of the Soviet system filled their pockets too, by the way, if you think it's a different, separate organization. And they said that for them, peace was the end of all opposition. That's how they defined peace. So Strong was the driving force behind the idea for world governance by the United Nations. And look at all organizations now attached to universities for world governance. He dreamt up a world tax on monetary transactions of 0.5%, which would have given the UN an annual income of $1.5 trillion. That's on top of all the other money they get. But equal then to the income of the USA. The stumbling block was the Security Council and their power of veto. So he devised a plan to get rid of Security Council, but failed to get it implemented. Then along came the idea that global warming might just be the device, to get his world governance proposal up and running. And it wasn't his, folks. As I say, it's an organization, very old organization. It runs your central banks. It runs your World Bank, your IMF, and the Bank for International Settlements. They didn't believe, these guys never believed that the people were fit for democracy and could be ever trusted in democracy. But they would use democracy as an excuse to invade other countries that didn't have a semblance of it. Strong was appointed Secretary General of the Air Summit, and in 1992, imagine they pretty well create the organization, then appoint themselves as head. In 1992, addressed the Air Summit in Rio, and he told the thousands of climate change delegates, "It is clear that current lifestyles and consumption patterns of the affluent middle class, involving high meat intake, consumption of large amounts of frozen and convenience foods, use of fossil fuels, appliances, home and workplace air conditioning and suburban housing are not sustainable." And so basically, they said they'd have to end, and this is me ad-libbing here too from other articles about them. He said that they would have to basically end a lot of consumerism, be post-consumer, and you're going to austerity. That's the idea behind it. And also, they had big meetings where Strong and others, but he did say that they'd have to eliminate and destroy Western manufacturing. And you think they've got a say in anything? Do you really think that? Because the organizations, all these organizations I've mentioned, they're not, you don't get any say in it. They don't ask for your opinion on anything. They don't care about your opinion on anything. From the United Nations, multifaceted organization, all the way down to anything else, you never ask your opinion on anything. Never mind your vote on it. You don't get that either. You vote these guys in. And it says, there goes the Sunday roast, a house to live in. I haven't seen a Sunday roast for years and years. The occasional hamburger and generally life on earth as we know it. But what Strong didn't tell the delegates was that he was involved in the purchase of the Colorado Land and Cattle Company, which he bought from Adrian Khashoggi. Remember Khashoggi? An arms dealer who had strong connections with the Bin Laden family. Interesting how they all come together, the heroes and the zeros, This is a 200,000 acre property called the Baca, had two hidden secrets. Now, one was it sat above vast underground water systems. It's actually the largest aquifer system in the United States. Just happens to be that. And Strong wanted to remove the water, being in front of the American Water Development Corporation to exploit the water by pumping it out for commercial intent, but was stopped by the locals who feared it would destroy the delicate environment. Well, it would destroy their cattle systems and everything, and their farming. Here's the power of these crooks, But don't forget too, I think it was Rockefeller who actually owned that Baca Ranch. The Maclean's magazine in Canada, and I've got the original magazine. I actually had a big article about Maurice Strong, and he set up a big New Age movement there with all kinds of New Age religion types to try and get together, he said, and create a new culture for the world. He had gurus from India, he had Buddhists, he had all kinds of New Agers there too. And you find, they create the New Agers for you to follow. They do. And you'll find they always go in the same direction of, we've all got to be one. We've all got to be together in this world of ours. We must all agree with the same agendas, blah, blah, blah. Well, they train these folks. They always train your leaders, always. Just like Maurice Strong himself was trained for his position. But yeah, the Maclean's magazine had a good article on the Baca Grande development there. He said too that Maurice Strong had been told by a mystic, mystics, that's what it said, yeah, that the back would become the center for a new planetary order which would evolve from the economic collapse and environmental catastrophes that would sweep the globe in the years to come. And you know something? You will get certain catastrophes because you won't be able to heat yourself or use air conditioning for those who are in really hot climates. And you won't get meat anymore unless you can really afford incredible prices, which puts most of the people out of the picture. And at the last meeting at the Paris climate change thing, again, massive articles compiled by think tanks, obviously, to eliminate your intake of meat. It really is fascinating to reminisce for me. It's all reminiscing for me because I studied Maurice Strong. I gave lots of talks on Maurice Strong. I can remember too when he went to Russia. And they laid out the red carpet, lots and lots of it, for Mr. Maurice Strong to walk on as though he was royalty. I'd never seen that done before for anybody. But they certainly knew who he was. By the way, I did articles on him too, because he had his aunt, he belonged to a revolutionary family, intergenerational, and his aunt was an advisor to, I think it was Mao Zedong, the leader of communism in China. Her grave was next to his over there in China. And an article in one of the Canadian papers said that he was over there visiting the grave of his auntie. Then he set up there his home for a long time and still worked for the United Nations, working on setting all their businesses up in China from the West, which we all paid for as they all got moved over there. Did you get to vote in any of this, folks? Of course you didn't. Most folk don't even know about it even today. So these are the real technocrats that are created and groomed, picked up young, and groomed for the positions. And that's what a technocrat is. Now, also, Maurice Strong was busy founding the Earth Council Institute in 1992 and recruiting world luminaries such as Michael Gorbachev, Shimon Peres, Al Gore, and David Rockefeller. In 2000, Earth Charter was formed as a further push by Strong to create a world government body, or governing body. That's what you call it, governing, you see. But it's government, of course. You don't need a place even for government. You can be scattered across the planet. Although eventually they will have one, for sure. I'm sure they will. They're the builders, remember. The builders. And in 2005, the most powerful man in the push to save humanity by steady promotion of the theory of human-induced greenhouse gases was caught with his hand in the till. And investigations in the United Nations Oil for Food program found that Strong had endorsed a check for $988,885 made out to M. Strong, issued by a Jordanian bank. The man who gave the check, South Korean businessman Tong Sung Park, was convicted in 2006 in a U.S. federal court of conspiring to bribe UN officials. Strong resigned and fled to Canada and thence to China, where he's been living ever since. Well, he's dead now. That was the Oil for Food programs and so on. To starving people. They don't do anything of any sort of decency towards any humanity. They have no common decency. In fact, they despise common humanity. But also, too, I think, if I remember, was it Boutros Ghali there? Or Kofi Annan? But I know that it was the son of one of the UN head, of the UN head at the time, who also was involved in that food program, Oil for Food, for Iraq. There were starving people, of course, because we're so humanitarian towards the people in the Middle East that we starve them to death all the time if we're not blowing them up. And that's the part two. I think a lot of this may have come from talks that I gave, I don't know. But it says Strong is to believe to have sanctioned China because of his cousin Anne Louise Strong, a Marxist who lived with Mao Zedong. Yeah, that's right, for 2 years. And when she died in 1970, her funeral was arranged by Premier Chu En-lay, and Louis Strong was a Comintern member. So was Pierre Trudeau, the father of the present Prime Minister of Canada. An organization formed in 1919 as the Third International, with one of its aim to use by all available means, including armed force, for the overthrow of the international bourgeoisie. Quite a world we have, isn't it? But don't forget the big organization that helped fund it all and promote it all, and the banking system that funded that communist system into existence. Didn't do it by itself. Quite a world, really. Anyway, I'm getting lost in all this kind of stuff. I didn't mean to even go in this direction, but there you are. And I'm going to try and just touch on some articles here for those who want to look it up and see for themselves. It's amazing again. Rand be like the arrogant prunes of young, very naive, but arrogant prunes that run our lives at the moment, or think they do. If you cave into them, believe you me, there's going to be euthanasia down the road for anyone over a certain age, folks. It's already on the cards. And these characters are the ones that'll be pushing all. Anyway, it says, the cost to West Australia of Shorten's green energy plan revealed $1 billion. Be a lot more than that, folks. I'll put this up anyway. Australia's a big one, because they use that as a big test bed too, much like Canada. All the old British Empire system, countries are always test beds where they push things, and we don't object as much as some people like America. Yet far more. That's why the US was the hope for a lot of the world, for the people, the population who did stand up to their own government and really push the rules. If you have no rules, like a constitution, or they're being ignored, then you don't have a country anymore. Or whoever's running your country is not what it was. It's been taken over, obviously. But it was the hope to the world for the rights that the citizens had. It really was. It's a sad house, mate. It's been taken over itself, probably long ago actually, by the money boys and so on. And whoever has the gold maketh the rules. I think it was one of the Brofmans that said that years ago. And that's true. We're all running on this crazy thing called money. The only a select few have the right apparently to manage at the top. Questions and answers to climate change, all you should know about their position. Also, another one too is to do with the carbon taxes, and it says details of the horrible carbon tax bill. Democrat Florida Congressman Ted Deutsch has introduced a carbon tax bill to impose a new national energy tax on the American people. So I'll put this one up as well. And it's called the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act of 2018. In the countries that are plummeting, because we're now flattening the planet, to be a mass of poverty, then a smaller middle class, then the elite and the professionals who rule us all those in academia, etc. That is the system. That's how it's planned. And I've mentioned before about how bad it's in Britain. As they build houses, by the way, in the newspapers, for masses of migrants coming in. It says 24,000 people sleeping rough on public transport in the UK, a charity says. And that's from The Guardian. And it says more than 25,000 people in Britain will spend the festive period sleeping rough in cars, trains, buses or tents, according to new estimates that throw lights on the scale of so-called hidden homelessness. There's a lot more than that, I'm sure. And at least 320,000 homeless people in Britain at the moment, says a shelter. A charity says the figure for England, Scotland and Wales is likely to be underestimated. And then excess winter deaths in England and Wales is because the folk in their homes are dying. This is not in the streets. Mainly, anyway. But it says there's not one mention of fuel poverty in the entire article. Because the folk can't get fuel. They can't pay for fuel. Because they're doing so well, paying for all the other things. You know this, in the welfare system. And more and more folk are flooding in, need a lot of money to be taken care of. Well, where's it coming from, folks? Who's paying it off? Guess. So it says snow in Derbyshire last December. The temperature last winter is thought to have been partly to blame for the excess deaths. Yada yada. And there was 50,100 excess deaths in England and Wales last winter. A prolonged spell of extreme cold. But it's amazing how they managed to skip they're trying to get away from the folk dying in their homes, actually. And just say they're dying in the winter. And then there's this article too, about, again, along the Maurice Strong plan, the big boys he worked for. And he was an employee, he was a high technocrat, but he was ruthless too, a ruthless tyrant, and that's what a technocrat is. They don't believe in democracy. They don't talk to the people with any pretended service to the public. They're not elected by the public. They're just put over them, in charge of the public. And that's the farce of democracy. He's only one of many, by the way. Look at what the Trilateral Commission is as well. And Brussels denies the European Union rules encourage euthanasia tourism. And of course it does, because it's part of the agenda, right? And they deny the EU rules have facilitated the growth of euthanasia tourism amid fears it's becoming more popular in Belgium. There's been an increase in the number of patients travelling from EU countries where euthanasia is illegal to die in Belgium, where so-called mercy killings has been legal since 2002. And so they're going about that too. But they've been, well, I've got it everywhere now. You've got it in Canada now as well. It's cheaper than giving you treatment, isn't it? It really is. If you think it's all for to help you, no, it's because it's cheaper than giving you good treatment. That's what it is, folks. And then you have another one on suicide tourism from Wikipedia. And then, here's another thing. You always think about what you're trained to believe by the so-called experts, right? Bertrand Russell, they'll train the public to listen to experts, but always to avoid their own common sense. A cardiologist slams incorrect advice from the World Health Organization, urging people to replace butter and lard with healthier vegetable oils in 2019. And Dr. Asim Malhotra called them the WHO to review and update its guidance. Butter has been demonized for decades over its high content of saturated fats, but an array of scientific evidence is beginning to counter those claims. They've always known what the counter the claims were. It says here that he's an avid supporter, this doctor, of saturated fats, which he thinks have been wrongly demonized since the 1970s. Same time in the 1970s when they demonized the fat. Remember the big sugar industry? I read the articles where it's admitted only recently, declassified stuff. They paid massive amounts of money to, again, you always buy professionals from folks in medicine. And to write all these articles out to start the whole craze that it was fat, so it was to blame for folk becoming fat. Not sugar, huh? Anyway, this doctor told me online, he says, our friend was shocked and disturbed that the WHO are giving incorrect and non-evidence-based advice on fats. Asking people to replace butter or lard with industrial seeds such as corn, sunflower, soybean, or safflower will continue to cause harm to public health. These oils, being particularly high in omega-6 fatty acids, are pro-inflammatory. That's why you get so much arthritis and problems. And can be toxic when heated for common frying purposes. And it's much, much worse than that. You understand too, if you're into evolution as an example, if you're into that, you didn't evolve on these oils. Also too, you had China accusing the UK of deep-rooted pride and prejudice after Defence Secretary Gavin Williamson, this is in Britain, raised deep concerns over Huawei's, that's a big Chinese network system, manufacturer of their modems and stuff, involvement in 5G network. So, again, they're hammering China and China and China, even though, but most of the stuff that China's got has already been tested upon us by other companies. It really is, And of course China and Russia, the new Russia, are supposed to be the main enemies at the moment. Another one too, they arrested a couple of people in supposedly the Gatwick airport in England. Because a little drone went over it, supposedly. But again, after the arrest of them, and really, imagine getting your face plastered across the planet in front pages, being laid out by cops. And it was all false. Can you believe that? And when they do something like that, they never admit they're wrong. They never ever do that. They never admit they're wrong, folks. And then at the end, even the police chief says, well, of course it could be, there's no evidence there actually was a drone there. It was just hearsay. Someone phoned it in and made big news about this. And then but again, no apology to the poor people who had nothing to do with it. At all. I'll put the article up anyway. And then you find that if there's other articles coming out, because it's almost like a big ad for the military industrial boys, because they got all these, we could have got this new system in here if the government would buy it to detect the smallest drones at all and fire them out of the skies, etc., etc. It's like a big ad. It's like a false flag thing to sell stuff. It really is. That's what I think it really is. And then you have Facebook Secret Censorship Rulebook. Thousands of slides of banned so-called hate groups, in other words, phrases and emojis, they call them, that 7,500 lowly paid moderators are supposed to use to please 2 billion users. I mentioned it too. A lot more actually in the Philippines. But yeah, they have organizations now to ban your speech, which is to ban your thought, which eventually is to punish and ban you if you haven't quite figured it out yet. In a cashless society, for even paying your rent, like Bertrand Russell said in the 1940s. Isn't that astonishing, eh? Macron in France claims that again French police will be given pay raise after the blue vests joined the yellow vests and anti-government movement, but of course they did it for money. And WhatsApp, child porn problem. Google and Facebook's ad networks funded apps that led users to groups on the private messenger that are dedicated to swapping illegal images. Pedophiles. And pedophile groups. ISIS has executed 700 Syrian prisoners in the past 2 months, says Human Rights Group. It's really something, isn't it? Eh? It really is something. The world you live in, as to what they want you to believe. But again, the RAF now, it says track RAF unit could have downed drone causing chaos for tens of thousands at Gatwick, but ministers refused to let them help. By the way, people say that they saw a drone, but again, there's no conclusive proof that it even happened. But it really is a big push, I think, for really new systems of defense around airports. And money. That's what we live in, a system of mass money creation, right? Also, as you know, the stuff about the US pulling troops out of Syria, they haven't quite done it yet. But if you just look at the maps, you'll find that just across the border of Syria, you've got massive US military base in Iraq. And just across the border, with about 55,000 troops in it. And the US has sold about $3.5 billion, I think, of arms equipment to Turkey, and Turkey now has got troops massing on the Syrian border. So everything's really games, for perception management, and it's rather sad. Remember, you can buy the books and discs I have at cuttingthroughthematrix.com, and you can find out how to do it, or donate, in fact, and help me tick along here, because, as I say, who knows how long any of us can last, or even be allowed to keep ticking, put it that way, in this present system, because it's becoming rather ruthless. It always was ruthless, camouflaged under the guise of democracy, but they're becoming more ruthless